Hi, I'm Bly, watercolor artist and mom of 6. My passions are people, paint, and petals. Please join me from my kitchen table where I teach you fun watercolor skills so that you can incorporate this creative hobby into your own busy life. Hi everybody, thanks for joining me. So this is my April workshop in a box, and we are going to paint something really pretty and springy. So there are 6 colors in your kit. There is an ultramarine blue, ultramarine rose, ultramarine violet, turquoise, rosewood, and lemon yellow. And we are going to mix these colors in different arrangements to get all the shades that you see in that picture. And you can see the colors here swatched out for you. So we're going to start by swatching our colors, and then I'm going to teach you how to do the little Johnny jump ups as an intro activity. All right, so we're going to mix all the different shades that we need for our picture. So first let's swatch the individual colors, and then we will do our mixtures. So we're going to start with the ultramarine blue. And that's a really pretty color there. Then we will do ultramarine violet, which looks very similar in the palette to the ultramarine blue, but you should be able to tell a difference. So there's the ultramarine violet. Then ultramarine rose, which is this really pretty pink color. And then we have the rosewood, which is kind of a brown orange. And then the daffodil yellow color, which is a pale bright yellow. And then lastly, we have the turquoise. And that looks it's a really pretty greeny blue, and when we mix it with the yellow or the ultramarine blue, it's going to give us a nice variety of blue shades. So now we're going to mix the ultramarine blue and the turquoise. And we're going for a robin's egg blue color. And you can get a couple different variations depending on either how much blue or how much turquoise you mix. So this mixture has a little bit more of the ultramarine blue in it. And now I'm mixing some more of the turquoise in, so you can see the difference in those two shades. Okay, so now we're going to make a very bright spring green with the turquoise and the yellow. So we're going to mix the turquoise and the yellow to get a really bright spring green. And same thing with this green. You can get a variety of different shades depending on how much yellow you mix into the turquoise. All right, and that makes a really pretty spring green. So we'll use those two green shades in our picture. All right, so now we're going to mix the rosewood with the ultramarine pink to get a warm, earthy pink color. And we're going to use this color to do one of the daffodils. So ultramarine pink and the rosewood. And we're mixing this up, and this is a really pretty color, I think. So we're going to use this color for one of the daffodils, because you know there are some daffodils that are more to the pink range of colors. Now we're going to mix the yellow with the rosewood, and this is going to give us more of a pale orange. And we're going to use this color for some of the daffodils as well. And again, you can see if you vary how much of one color you add, you can get a couple different shades and mixtures. Okay, so we're gonna mix a dark neutral color, and we're gonna use the neutral colors for the basket, the little bird's nest basket, and any dark areas. So to get a brown color, we're going to mix the ultramarine blue and the rosewood. Now this is more like a black color because I have a lot of blue in it. This black color we're going to use for like the dirt in the nest or basket. And if you mix in a little bit more of the rosewood to this, you'll get a real pretty brown. And that's what we're going to use for the basket. So there's more of a brown color. And if I mix even a little bit more of the rosewood into it, I'll get even more of a warm brown. So those are the neutral colors that we're going to be using. And the last color we're going to mix is a deep blue violet. We're going to use that for some of the shadow areas in some of our flowers. So I'm going to mix the ultramarine blue with the ultramarine violet just to get a real dark, deep blue violet color. And we'll add that as another area of just as another dark in our picture. So now that we've mixed all our colors, I'm going to show you how to paint these cute little Johnny Jump Ups or Viola Flowers. And you can use this little painting that we're going to do, you know, on a pretty spring card or something. So with our yellow color, we're going to paint the lower petal. I kind of think of it like the tongue petal, I guess, because there's just one lower petal. Then we're going to do the light pink layer that has two small petals coming out from either side, look a little bit like ears. And they're that real pretty light pink. And then the two upper petals that go around those are with the ultramarine violet. And they're larger, and they kind of come up and around. And I'm just going to fill them in here. You can also leave some little white areas as like a little highlight. That looks pretty too. So here's my two purple petals. And then I'm going to, after these petals are in, yeah, that looks nice. I'm going to use the rosewood for the little center of the pansy viola flower. So it gets this pretty orangey center. And then I'm going to let this dry and add some of the little details after the flowers dry. So I'm going to paint a few more of these flowers in different positions. And just by changing the shape of the petals in your flower, it will make the flower look like it's turned in different directions. That's called foreshortening. So I'm just going to change the shape of this bottom petal, and this is going to make it look like it's kind of turned to the side. And I'm just going to paint a few more of these bottom petals while I'm at it. to really fill out this little clump of violets. So here's another one, and maybe, let's see, how many do I have? I have 4. Well, we might add one later. So now with my second layer of petals, I'm just sort of keeping it consistent with the direction that I placed the lower yellow petal and just filling it out. And you can see this one is going to run into that other one. So I'm just going to tuck the violet petals underneath that main flower. So what I'm doing now, and this is a trick that you can use in your pictures, is I am lifting some of the wet color from the flower with my dry brush. So I just dry my brush off on a paper towel, and then I can touch it to a part of the painting and lift that color out. So it's almost like erasing in a way. And so if you have a stroke that you don't like and it's still wet, you can do that with your brush. So now I'm just tucking these little violet petals underneath the big one, and I really like how that is conveying the pansy head looking in a different direction. I think that looks nice. So I'm just going to continue adding these upper petals while I'm waiting for some of the other parts of the flowers to dry. And this is why when you watch artists painting, like if you're watching somebody on Instagram, or if you're watching me on Instagram, you'll notice that I kind of work all the different areas of the picture, and that's because often I'm waiting for another area to dry before I can go and do something else. But it's also a nice way to be able to focus on your entire composition at the same time. So I'm going to tuck these petals underneath that larger one. And I like how those little heads are facing. So that area, it's not quite dry yet. So I think I'll do the stems. I'm going to mix up a real bright springy green. So I'm going to use the turquoise and the yellow, adding a little bit more of the yellow than the green. And I'm going to paint in just a few little loose stems. You know that on these violas, pansy type flowers, the stems, they kind of come out of the back of the flower head. So the heads kind of have like this bouncy look to them. So that's what I'm trying to convey here, is just how the stem attaches to the back of the head and then comes down, and the flowers have that buoyancy. And then I'm just going to add a few little leaves. And here is a good place to vary your greens. The leaves, there's so much greenery in flowers that you have to give it some kind of interest. You can't just use the same green for every part of the stem, leaves, and so on. And so this is a great place to practice mixing different green colors by either adding more yellow or more blue. All right, so my centers are dry. I'm going to put this touch of the rosewood in the center. And then I'm going to take either the violet, the ultramarine violet, or the ultramarine blue. It's kind of up to your preference. And I'm just going to do some little line dashes that you see on the Viola flowers. And one of the reasons these flowers I think are so striking is because they combine complementary colors. So if you're thinking of the color wheel, complementary colors are colors that lie opposite to each other. So purple and yellow are complementary colors, and they kind of bring out the best in each other. Okay, so we are going to tuck into our main picture here, and with all the colors that we mixed before, we are going to do this lovely spring little vignette. So we're going to start with the hyacinth flower, and you can see that the hyacinth flower is made up of a bunch of little flowers that have 4 petals. So that's what I'm going to start with, and I will demonstrate that for you. So I'm going to use a variety of the violet, blue, and rose colors for the flower, but I'm going to start with the ultramarine violet in kind of like a medium, not really light, not really dark, just sort of a medium tone. And with the shape of my brush, I'm going to paint these 4-petaled flowers. Now, because the whole flower head is made up of these, you're not going to see the entire little 4-petaled shape on a lot of the little buds. So they're going to kind of get tucked underneath each other. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm showing more of some of the petals and less of other petals. And some petals I'm not showing at all. And I'm just going to keep filling in these little petal shapes to make the overall arched entire hyacinth bloom. So I keep adding these little petals, and this is just a really fun, easy way to do this flower, I think. It's hard to go wrong. And you can see just by using up the paint that's in my brush, I'm getting these different tones and lights and darks naturally in my blooms. So I've reloaded my brush now, and so I'm getting these darker petals, and I'm just continuing to fill this out until I think that the overall shape is what I want. And so you can see as I get to the edges, I'm maybe doing just 1 or 2 of the petals on one of the little flower buds and not showing 1 or 2 of the other little petals. So I'm getting close. I like the arch that's on the top of this flower head, so I'm going to fill in a little bit more at the bottom of it here, just to make sure that it's the right shape I'm going for. And I think maybe 1 more little layer at the bottom of flower heads, and then it will be good. All right, so we're going to continue making these little flowerets, and then after I finish with the hyacinth, I am going to move on to the daffodils. So I like the shape of that now. I'm going to leave it and probably come back and fill in a little bit more later. So now we're going to do these daffodils. And you can see the 3 daffodils I have here are all slightly different colors. So we're going to use a mixture of rosewood and yellow, or the rosewood and the ultramarine pink rose. So I'm going to mix up that color that we made on our sheet before with rosewood and yellow for my first daffodil. Now daffodils have that really pretty little cup. So daffodils are fun to paint because they have that little cup in the middle, And then they have the 5 or 6, I'm not sure. I think it might be 6 petals around the little cup shapes. So we're going to paint them from an angle, and I have my little baby friend here, my youngest, helping me while I'm recording. So those are the cute little sounds you hear. But you can see the inside of the cup. It's kind of like painting a glass. And then the downward portion of the cup that attaches to the petals. And then I paint my 5 petals in. You can't see one of them because it's on the other side. Now this next daffodil, I'm going to try to make it a little bit more yellow, I think. And this one is kind of facing angled up. So you can see how I'm turning them in different directions. And I'm just getting the basic shape and color down right now, and then I am going to go back and add more details after this dries. So my third daffodil, I'm going to use the ultramarine rose and rosewood to get that earthy pink orangey color that we made at the beginning. And this daffodil is going to go in the middle of these other 2. So I've got my little cup on top there, and then I'm getting my petal mixture. And it fits nicely between those other 2. I like how that looks. Now, once I get these basic daffodil shapes in, I am going to add a few stems, and I'm just adding a little bit of color variation here with my rosewood, just to give it some variety. Because the daffodil shapes are still wet, any color that I drop in there will kind of bleed and fade out a little bit. So now I'm going to do the stems and the leaves of the daffodils, and probably I will also put in the other things that are more to the front of the picture. So I'm going to try to mix a real pretty spring green with the turquoise and the yellow, but heavier on the turquoise end. I'm going to save that really, really bright yellow green for some other leaves. And getting more turquoise in it. So daffodils have stems that kind of come out from the back of the flower head, similar to the Johnny Jump Up, the violets that we were doing earlier. And the flower heads are heavy, so you're kind of conveying that feeling of weight by angling the stem. You can see how I put that little turn in the stem. So I need a little bit more of blue in there, so I added some more turquoise. And now I'm just adding some leaves coming out behind the hyacinth. So you're just going to add some leaves where you think it looks like it needs it. And what we're doing now is just getting down the basic composition, and we're going to come back and add more details once we get all the main elements in. So you're not going to necessarily start a leaf and finish it all at the same time. We're trying to work the whole picture at once. So I have a few leaves in, and I might add more later, but I think now I'm going to do some of the Johnny Jump Ups and also the eggs, because the eggs are really the um, the element that is furthest to the front. So I'm going to paint a few of the little Johnny Jump Up petals. And then I'm going to need to do my eggs. So I'm going to wet the egg shape with a brush full of just plain water. I'm going to do a wet and wet egg, robin's eggs. So I've wet an egg shape kind of slanting off to the right with plain water. And now I'm mixing up a robin's egg blue color with the ultramarine blue and the turquoise. And once I get the color that I'm looking for, I'm going to drop it into the wet egg shape, kind of on the edges, and then it will naturally bleed out. So I'm going to put 2 more eggs in here. I'm going to do one kind of slanting off to the left behind this middle one, and then a smaller one to the right. So same thing, I'm going to wet the egg shape. Part of it is hidden by this front egg. And then drop in my color, and maybe I'll vary the color a little bit, add a little bit more of the blue, just to make it look slightly distinct. And then I'm going to do a smaller egg over to the right. Now I'm going to wet a smaller egg shape to the right for my 3rd egg, and I'm going to drop in the blue color again around the edge and let it bleed in towards the center. And you don't have to be too concerned about where you're placing these eggs, because we are building this painting out around the things that are furthest to the front. So that's why we're putting things in a certain order. That way we can be kind of spontaneous, but also there's a little bit of planning involved. So before I do the Johnny Jump Ups, I am going to put in the basket, the lower shape of the basket, or bird's nest, whatever you want to think of it as. So I'm going to mix up a brown neutral color using the ultramarine blue and the orange rosewood color. And I'm going to try for more of a brown shade rather than a black shade, because we're going to save that really dark black for the dirt aspect of the basket. So with the very tip of my brush, I'm making these quick small strokes in the direction that the nest is kind of assembled. So when you're looking at a nest, you can see all the little sticks and hairs and feathers and twine and pine needles that the birds have collected, and they're all kind of like loosely woven together in one direction. And so that's what I'm trying to convey here with all of my little strokes, is just all these separate little pieces that have been stuck together to become one thing. So I'm just going to keep doing these quick, thin strokes with the tip of my brush. And so I continue to mix up some of this neutral color, and this time it's a little darker than it was before, which I like. It gives some variety to the nest. So I'm going to continue to fill the nest out. So I'm going to continue to fill out the nest, and you'll notice that I'm not putting the line of the nest in behind the hyacinth. I'm leaving that area open because we're going to fill that in with some of the Johnny Jump Up violet flowers. I'm just going to do a little small bit there But for the most part, I'm just leaving it kind of open. So I like how this nest is looking, and I'm gonna leave it, let it dry, and then we're gonna come back and add some more details to it as we go. So let's get our little Johnny Jump Up flowers in now, and then we will start to add our details and really refine things. All right, so I'm going to fill in these empty areas with some Johnny Jump Ups. So I start with the lower petal, and by the way I am turning the lower petal, I'm kind of indicating which way these flowers are facing. So I'm going to put a few down here in front of the hyacinth, a few arching up to the right over here, and then a few behind the little eggs. So I've got the first petal in. Now I'm going to add the pink petals with my ultramarine rose. And as we did in the little practice exercise, I'm going to keep these consistent with the angle of the lower petal. So you can see that one is turned a little bit to the side. This one's also turned. If I keep all of the petals consistent, then it really gives an indication of direction. So this is looking good. I like those. And then I'm going to add the upper petals here. All right, I've got my pink petals in. Now I'm going to use my violet color and do the upper petals. And again, like I did in the little exercise, I'm kind of lifting out some of the color from the center of these flowers so that there's a little bit of a highlight when I put the rosewood orange color into the middle. Okay, so I'm going to do the upper petals now with the violet, and some of them are going to have to overlap as before, and that is fine. It you know, their flowers come in clumps usually, so that's really what we're showing here. And if you don't want to fill in the full petal, that's fine too. That gives it a nice little white highlight sometimes. And you can see that I'm trying not to touch the pink petals with my brush because those are mostly still wet. So if I run, all right, so I'm just being careful not to touch the pink petals. I don't actually want them to bleed into each other for these flowers. And this one I'm just going to tuck under this other guy here. And their little heads are going to look like they're just sort of peeking up over these pretty blue eggs. So this flower is, part of it is really getting cut off here, and that's okay. It's running into the purple hyacinth. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Just putting in what part of the petal I can. Sometimes that happens and you just go with it. Adding the upper petals to these couple little flowers on the side here. And then I will add their stems and some leaves. And then we're really going to be at a point where we've defined all the areas of our painting, and then we're just going to go back and refine what we already have done. We're going to add details and darks, lights, to really make it pop. So I'm going to put in these little orange centers and then probably let it dry before I go back in and do the little details with the blue. And yeah, there we go. All right, so while I've got it, I'm going to put some of that orange up here in the cup part of this daffodil and give it a few details. I'm going to add the little vein in some of the petals. Just give it a little bit more interest. And same thing on this right daffodil. And I just want to use a light touch with these details. You know, a detail ceases to be a detail when you make the whole picture like that. So if you're too heavy-handed, you're going to put too much on there and you're not going to be pleased with it. So just try to go easy. You can always add more in, but you can't take anything away. So now I'm going to add some details to the hyacinth flower, and I'm going to do that by adding some lighter purpley pink, and also some lighter blue and also a darker blue. So I'm going to start with the lighter pink, and I'm just going to be very light with it and put a few little petal indications in between the flowers that are already there. And I'm just sort of spreading them out a little bit, filling in so that there's not quite as much white area in between the petals that I currently have. I'm just trying to convey a sense of form and also to vary the color in the flower. And so I think that looks good. I'm gonna now use the ultramarine blue, and I'm going to use it to define some of the individual little blooms in the hyacinth flower by putting a center, this dark blue center in some of them. And that's going to really draw attention to the fact that, oh, you know, this hyacinth flower is made up of all these tiny little flowers. And look, they have 4 petals and a center. So that's what I'm doing with this ultramarine blue. And I like how that looks. So I think that's good for now. I might see some later as I'm looking at it, but I'm going to leave it there, I think. And while I've got the blue, I'm going to add the little details to my viola flowers that are dry now. All right, and I think I'm going to wait on that blue because some of the little violet flowers aren't quite dry yet. So I'll use the blue with some of the turquoise and add a few more leaves to really fill out this picture a bit more. So now I'm going to add a little bit more yellow, just using a variety of greens, trying to place my leaves where it looks like the painting needs something filling it in. And I can also go back later and add some more. Okay, so I'm going to add some more yellow to this green, and I'm going to do some little stems on these little viola flowers. And like I mentioned in the little exercise, you know, the stem comes out from the back of their heads to give them that bouncy kind of look. So we want to try to convey that with where you place the stem. on the flower. And not all the flowers will need to have stems. Um, you know, when you look at this picture, your eye is reading it as this flower, but you don't have to be so literal about it. So I tucked in a few little yellow-green leaves as well. And now I'm going to mix up a real dark black neutral with the ultramarine blue and the rosewood. And I'm going to use this to put in like the filling of the nest. So this is going to go around, and I'm just putting this in a real loose way. Kind of, it's, you know, it kind of looks clumpy. Um, just putting it in loosely around the eggs, around the bottom of the violet flowers. And so I really like how that is making the eggs and the flowers pop. And I think I'm also going to use this color to put some details in the nest. I'm going to sort of use it to just fill in these little areas of white, not all of them, just some of them, to give the nest more of a feeling of depth. So I can even make this more of like a really dark brown for the nest by mixing in some more of the rosewood color. And I'm gonna do a few strokes with the tip of my brush, and then I'm also going to paint just some of those little clumpy areas into the empty white spaces. So you want to leave some of the white spaces between the fibers of the nest because you want highlights, and those will act as your highlights, but then you also want to paint in some dark spaces. And so that's what we're doing here with this this color. And I like how that looks. I think that's looking good. I don't want to put in too much. If I think it needs more later, I can always go back and add that in. So we're getting pretty close. This is looking really, really nice. I think I'm going to add a few more shadows on the eggs just to define them a little bit more. So this egg is behind the middle egg, and so I'm going to give it a dark blue shadow to just try to indicate that a little bit more. And I like how that looks. That blue, it really blends well with the rest of the picture. And so maybe I'll even put a little bit of a shadow on that middle egg to just sort of convey its roundness as well. Although I think the way it is now, I like the bleeding colors of it. So now I'm going to add these little speckle details to the eggs, which really kind of finishes the egg look, I think. And just using the very tip of my brush, moving quickly, just touching it down. And I can also use this brown, the rosewood, to put the inside details on the violas, and also this darker brown to the inside of my daffodils to give them that feeling of depth. And yeah, so now the centers of my violets, I've got them all in, and they might be dry enough to add the blue streaks like I started before. So I'm just going to do a few little lines, on the bottom petal to give it a little bit of detail. And I think we're getting really close now. I think I want to pump up the shadow on one of the eggs. So even though I've already done the speckles, that's okay. I'm just gonna go back in and add a little bit more of a shadow. To me, it looks like it needs it, so I'm doing that here, but I'm making sure to preserve that nice white highlight in the middle of that egg that gives it that feeling of roundness that it has. And I'm going to put a shadow on this right egg as well. So I think this looks really nice. I'm just going to add a few more leaves, I think, to fill it out. And then maybe even put a few details in the green leaves that I already have. And then I think we will be done. So I'm going to mix up a darker green to just kind of put in between some of my lighter greens. And like I was saying earlier, because flowers and plants have so much greenery, it's really important to try to give some variety to the different shades of green that you use. So now I'm going to mix some yellow, kind of going back and forth between more of a blue green or more of a yellow green. And I'm just trying to be led by what my eye tells me is a place that needs something. Leaves are a great way to do a little something. And then some of these leaves I'm going to give like a little middle vein to. So I hope you enjoyed this workshop in a box. Thank you for joining me, and let's go live to paint another day.